Hi everyone, and welcome to this Covidence community webinar. And today we're going to be talking about the rise of systematic literature reviews. So my name is Julie Brown. I'm a community manager based in Auckland, New Zealand, and I'm joined by Laura Meller today, who is the head of community managers, and Laura's based in the UK. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. Today's session is being run in a standard webinar mode, and that means that all attendees will be muted. But you can ask us questions at any time by using the questions box, which you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen. If there isn't time to answer all of the questions during or after the presentation, we might have time for a little bit of Q&A at the end. We'll respond to you via email afterwards. Just to remind you that this session is being recorded, and everyone who's registered will receive a link to the recording of this webinar by email within the next 24 hours. Before we kind of jump in, I'm just going to provide a little bit of contextual information about Covidence for anyone here that isn't already familiar or used the platform. So Covidence is a not-for-profit organisation that was created by and for the research community and is designed to streamline the review process, and that's from title and abstract screening all the way through to data extraction and risk of bias assessment. The platform allows review teams to significantly reduce the amount of time that you spend on reviews, and that means that you can produce high quality evidence faster. We have a full-time team that's based around the world, and they continuously work on improving the product and providing technical support to our global user community. Now, Covidence is entirely cloud-based, so there's nothing to download. And as you can see, we support the world's largest review community with well over 300,000 users around the world. So today I'm going to talk about the history of systematic reviews, and I'm going to be looking at some of the trends that have emerged over recent years, and that's kind of including like the volume, the increasing volume, and some of the publication trends. Laura is then going to introduce some of the features in Covidence that can support you to complete your review more quickly without compromising quality. So I'm going to begin with the history of systematic reviews. So most commonly, we hear that the very first example of a systematic review was conducted in around 1753 by James Lind, who published a paper that aimed to provide a concise and an unbiased summary of the evidence on scurvy. But it wasn't really until the kind of 1970s and 1980s when more attention began to be paid to the growing need to improve the state of evidence synthesis. And although he wasn't the first person to call for a stronger scientific basis to healthcare, Archibald, or as we know him, Archie Cochrane, is justly honoured as the architect of evidence-based practice. Cochrane promoted the randomised controlled trial as the best evidence for treatment, and by instilling a really rigorous approach to understanding and applying empirical evidence, Archie Cochrane's legacy is really to integrate that integration of research and practice. So by the turn of the millennium, the doctrine of evidence-based medicine is really firmly established. And Jean Glass introduced the term meta-analysis, which kind of in part combines is about combining the results or pooling of results from separate studies. And we often hear that term applied within systematic reviews, and it's a statistical methodology. So what is a systematic review? Well, there are many definitions of systematic reviews out there, but they all seem to kind of arrive at this kind of statement that it's a review of the evidence on a clearly formulated question that uses systematic and explicit methods to identify and synthesize relevant evidence. And I'm sure many of you will have seen an image like this before, with systematic reviews seen at the top of the pyramid of evidence and less rigorous study designs as we go further down the hierarchy of evidence. So as systematic reviews have become more popular, we've seen this diversity in different types of review and the development of new review methodologies. And these are just a few examples. This isn't exhaustive, but a few examples of the more common types of review that are now being conducted and published. So alongside the traditional, the systematic review, some of the other methodologies might look at current evidence and where we can move to next, such as in the state-of-art reviews. Integrative reviews are more critical and look at the applicability of evidence to practice. Umbrella reviews bring multiple systematic reviews on the same topic or the same intervention together, and they're sometimes known as overviews. We've got rapid reviews here. So rapid reviews kind of speed up the process. They can omit or simplify some of the processes. So they might have a less comprehensive search, or they don't do a quality assessment, a quality appraisal, which in turn might have a knock-on effect where it starts to compromise the overall review quality, but it does push that forward much more quickly. And I kind of found myself thinking, are systematic reviews only found in medical and health sciences? Well, the dominant field for systematic reviews has traditionally been within medical and health sciences, and it certainly remains that way at the moment. But as the methodologies emerged, there's been a really sharp uptake in the usage in other kind of disciplines and fields, and we now see reviews being published in many other disciplines, some of which I've highlighted here on this slide. So we see a sharp increase in mathematics and engineering, education. We have reviews being published in business and social sciences and animal sciences. So they're just a few examples. Now, I guess, what are these reviews being used for? So systematic reviews are being used for a wide range of tasks. They're being used in the synthesis of evidence for clinical practice guidelines. Many funding bodies now require a systematic review to indicate that there is a gap in the evidence to justify funding applications. They're being used for scoping to look at the practicality of other research and in gap analyses. Systematic review methodology can incorporate statistical analysis. They're being used for publication purposes and to disseminate information and recommendations. And kind of ever increasingly, it appears that they're now being used as an integral component in teaching research methodology, in particular in higher degree programs. So I thought it would be interesting to look at some systematic review trends And I've been exploring this with some of our Covadence ambassadors. So I'm going to be sharing some ongoing work with you, which has been looking at patterns in publications of systematic reviews. Now this is interim data that's based on 567 systematic review publications at the moment. But I just thought it would be, it's very, very interesting work, and I thought it would be useful to share. So the first part of this slide is based on a publication by Hoffman that was published in 2021. And they looked at publication trends in systematic reviews that were published between the year 2000 and the year 2019. So we're looking at this part of the slide here. As you can see, there's been a significant and rapid increase in the number of systematic reviews that are being published. That started with around 4 systematic reviews a day being published in 2000. And by 2019, Hoffman estimated there were around 80 systematic reviews a day being published. The research that we've been doing up recently suggests that now in 2023, there are around 168 systematic reviews being published a day. So these are only publications that are reporting systematic reviews and doesn't include those other methodologies that we saw on a previous slide. So the actual volume of literature reviews being published per day is obviously even higher than this. It's a huge volume. And the technology to identify and produce systematic reviews has also rapidly progressed and includes a huge raft of tools now available, such as reference managers, systematic review management software, and bibliographic and bibliometric software. Whoops, sorry. And where are all these reviews being published? So of the 564 publications we've looked at, they were published in 444 different journals. Now, Hoffman's paper reported the most common journals were the Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews, PLOS One, and Medicine, Baltimore. And we also identified the Cochrane Database as the most common journal, but at the moment we have the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health and Helion as second and third place. In Hoffman's publication, the publications in the Cochrane Database of Systematic Reviews had decreased from about 48% in 2000 to 2004. They decreased very rapidly, so that in 2015 to 19, they accounted for 3.5% of the publications. And our data at the moment suggests that they account for around 2.7%. So I guess my concern is that now it's much easier to pay to publish without having to go through peer review. And so it's not clear how much that's influenced the kind of volume and diversity of publications. And we may be able to tease that out as we look at the journal impact factors in our data. It certainly will have affected the quality, and this is something that we need to be aware of as researchers. So if anyone has any other thoughts about that, that issue kind of around the pay to publish issue and whether that's affecting this huge number of journals that are now publishing systematic reviews, feel free to type your thoughts into the question box and let us know what you're thinking. We've so far identified corresponding authors based in about 70 different countries, with the US being the top of the list. Hoffman had reported authors in 60 different countries, and their top 3 countries were China, where they had around 19%, the USA was 16%, and the UK around 13%. So as you can see, our data show that China and the UK have slipped down the list slightly, while we see an increase for Brazil and Italy. There has in the past been a little bit of concern around the credibility of some of the research published by Chinese teams, and this may have resulted in that slight decrease that we're observing here. Alternatively, I think kind of the global upsurge in systematic reviews in the last couple of years may be an artifact of the COVID-19, with research teams being unable to conduct in-person research and kind of leaning towards more publications of systematic reviews. The mean number of authors on a review that we observed was around 5.8, with a minimum of 1 author and a maximum of 38. And again, it's a little bit concerning that journals would want to publish a manuscript claiming to be a systematic review with only 1 author. We found that 85.6% of the publications were identified as a systematic review by their title, compared with about 69% in Hoffman's paper. And I'm thinking that this is maybe due to the adherence to the PRISMA guidelines, which are promoting better quality of reporting, which of course is very reassuring to us all. So again, if you have a comment about whether you think that might be due to PRISMA, then do type your thoughts again into the box, the questions box. So we also looked at the volume of data. So not unexpectedly, we see a significant number of records are being retrieved. And at the moment, we're seeing a mean of just over 5,000 records per review that are being imported prior to deduplication and screening tasks. And of the records being imported, we estimate that it's less than 1% that are actually included in the final review. So this reflects a huge amount of work and time that's being needed for screening and deduplication. And as trends in the publication volume increase, then potentially so will the time required for these tasks, especially if they're being performed manually. We also looked at the databases that are being searched, and we found that there were a mean of around 4.7 databases being searched, and you can see the range there from just 2 databases up to 20. The most frequently occurring number of databases being searched was 3. And you can see here that the most commonly searched databases are Scopus, Medline, Embase, Web of Science, Cochrane databases, and surprisingly Google Scholar. So I wonder how you guys feel about the kind of the popularity of Google Scholar as a source of evidence for systematic reviews. I'm kind of thinking that this is it's a popular science source rather than what we might consider a formal database. And it's probably being selected because of the ease of accessibility. And of course that there's no cost to being able to access it as a source. So again, if you have any thoughts about that, then just pop that into the questions box and let us know. We did look to see if anyone was using systematic review software in their publications, and of those publications we've looked at so far, Covidence and Rayen are by far the top two runners for software being used in publications. Rayen is being used for screening, whereas Covidence is reported as being used for both screening and or for data extraction as well, supporting that. Registration of systematic reviews of protocols was quite interesting. 38% of the systematic reviews in our study had reported that they had registered their protocol, and of those, 91% were registered with Prospero. IMPLASI and Open Science Framework were the other most commonly reported platforms. Some publications had published their protocols in advance, and most of those were Cochrane systematic reviews. The publication and or registration of review protocols does add to the rigor and openness of the review process. It does allow for oversight and for replication of work and prevents the duplication of effort. For me personally, it's very reassuring that we see the registration of systematic review protocols, and I do believe that that should be encouraged. So I also just took a brief look at how long it takes to conduct and write systematic reviews. There's a publication by Bora in 2017 that estimated the time to complete and publish a review could be up to 67 weeks. That was with a mean of 5 authors. And they found that funded reviews tended to take longer to publish and involved more authors. And Hadaway in 2019, they looked at reviews in environmental sciences and estimated that it took around 164 days, which is about 33 weeks. So automation can speed up the review process, and using tools to facilitate the searching, the deduplications, screening, the risk of bias assessments and writing the review can all be used to facilitate the process. And Clark was able to decrease the time to 2 weeks to complete systematic reviews, but that was for a very experienced review team of 4. That team have now done further research and upscaled it to more complex and large reviews that include observational studies as well as randomized controlled trials. I think the emphasis here is on the use of experienced review teams, which we don't all have access to. It's certainly something to strive for, and Covidence has a goal to help reduce the time taken to conduct systematic reviews. So those kind of the speeding up of the time taken for reviews is kind of totally dependent on a number of factors, on the type of review, the number of reviewers, the number of studies that you're going to include, if you're going to undertake quality appraisal, the number of research questions that you have, and the number of outcomes as well. So they're all kinds of things to take into account. So what I've covered here is kind of what a systematic review is, how they're used. I've gone over, this vast amount of evidence that, it's taking a certain amount of time, that we have all these included studies, and that we need to find a process of making this much more efficient. So before I hand over to Laura, I just want to know if there are any other questions relevant to what I've just presented.
Hi, Julie. Hi, everyone. There's a couple of questions come in, well, many comments actually, around the pay to publish comments, Julie. So somebody said you might need to define what you mean by pay to publish. Many pay to publish also go through a peer review process, so some nuance there perhaps. And most journals require APCs now or other types of fees. So we've had a few comments around that.
Yep, I think they're all really good comments. I think my concern is around those journals where you pay a fee and the article is just published. So there is no peer review process. We often see articles that come out now where there are clear spelling errors. There's been no editing that's gone through. So those are the kind of journals that I'm referring to, rather than, higher impact factor journals where you do, I agree, pay a fee to have them published, but they will have gone through strict peer review processes and they will have been copy edited by the journal to produce a really high quality article. I'm more concerned about those kind of journals which don't even have an impact factor and that are much easier to just publish in by paying a fee. So those are the kind of journals that I'm referring to.
Okay, thanks.
Great, so I'm going to hand over to Laura now, who's going to tell us a little bit more about how Cofidence can help us. So
thanks, Julie.
That's okay. There we go.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can now see my screen. I'll just put that onto the slideshow. Great. So next up then is really where Cofidence comes in. So I thought you all might like to know a little bit about who is actually using Cofidence. And although most of our reviews are still created by users in medical and health sciences, we have seen recently a huge growth in some areas such as engineering, maths and technology, earth and environmental science reviews. These have seen over 90% growth in the last 6 months. So we've also seen over 70% growth in reviews in psychology, economics, business and social sciences. And this trend really reflects the type of literature reviews which we're now seeing being published in peer-reviewed journals. So Cofidence can support systematic literature reviews in a few important ways. We enable you to import references from databases and reference managers and allocate the sources of those imports for the Prisma flow diagram. And unless you're on a trial plan with Cofidence, there are no limits at all to the number of studies that you can import. Cofidence also deduplicates the references automatically on import. Cofidence enables you to manage your review and the review team. You can use the settings function to store your search strategy, decide if you want to use single or dual reviewer screening, and choose which data extraction templates you want to use. You can also monitor the team and the individual team members' progress. You can set up highlights, tags, and create reasons for exclusion at the full text phase. Cofidence can also speed up the screening process. So if you select sort by most relevant, that uses machine learning to register your team's votes and then make a prediction on which of the remaining studies are most likely to be included. So you can also switch on the randomized controlled trial classifier if you're working on a review in medical and health sciences. And I'll cover both of those features a bit later on. We also use a third party called Unpaywall to upload free to access PDFs where possible, which saves you time in locating and uploading studies. And we've also got a bulk upload tool for PDFs, which again saves time compared with manual upload. And we've also got a drag and drop feature, which is easy and quick to use. The Cofidence Prisma flowchart is now modifiable and shows the sources of citations, where you have identified the source, and it's aligned with the requirements of Prisma 2020 for reporting. Just talk a little bit about data extraction. Depending on which tool you use in Cofidence, you can export the data as a CSV, Excel, or as a RevMan compatible format. And we've, of course, got an experienced support team that can help you with problems and queries and provides regular training webinars, a bit like this one. So we offer a wide range of features that speed up the review process by reducing your workload without compromising the integrity of the review. So on from that, I'll just talk a little bit about some new features that we have in the platform. The first one of those is some functionality around involves AI and machine learning. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the new eligibility criteria format structured around PCOS. Thirdly, we have new functionality around Prisma and the capture of sources, of references. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about our new data extraction template in Extraction 1. So first of all, then, if we think about screening, as Julie's already mentioned, this is incredibly time consuming. With the increasing rate of publications, screening can take up to 33 person days on average, according to one study. So Covidence is using machine learning to speed that up whilst maintaining, as I've said, the high methodological quality that you would expect from Covidence. So we offer a couple of machine learning powered features in order to expedite the screening, as I've already mentioned, the randomized control trial study tagging and the most relevant source option. So let's look at those now. The RCT study tagging is currently available for reviews in medical and health science. It uses a highly sensitive algorithm developed by Cochrane. It's called the Cochrane RCT classifier. So screening a single title and abstract takes about 1 minute per record, we estimate. We can assume that voting no on non-RCTs would take far less time because, of course, you can exclude it immediately if you need RCTs in your study. So maybe that might take about 10 seconds per record if you can see straight away that it's not an RCT. So that's a huge, about an 83% reduction, we think, in the time spent screening irrelevant studies. So this is a feature that you can switch on and off in the settings when you set up your review. It's currently, as I say, only available in medical and health sciences because that's the type of data that this algorithm was trained on. So that is the RCT classifier. Moving on to talk about the most relevant sorting. This is now the default option for sorting your studies in Covidence. Sorting your studies by the most relevant can help to reduce the overall screening time for a review. So this feature uses machine learning to predict the study's inclusion likelihood based on your past screening decisions in this particular project. So we don't show any prediction scores. We want to make sure that the human decisions aren't biased by the computer inputs. And essentially, this process has the ability to shorten the workflow, if you like. So if we look at this screen, this slide on the right-hand side, what we're saying here is, although you'll still screen every single record, there's nothing done for you, there's nothing kind of quarantined or taken away from you, the decision maker. The assumption is that if you vote on if you move the relevant things into full text screening up front closer to the start of the process, you'll cut down the overall time you spend screening, because anything that's likely to get included will happen at the start of the process. You can move that straight through to the full text, and the people on your team can get straight on with assessing the full text and making the decision for inclusion there. So it's really a workflow time save that we propose with this feature. You can find out more about our machine learning and automation plans by going to the recent webinars page on our knowledge base and watching back the webinar that we ran in June this year. It's shown here. It's called An Update on Machine Learning AI in Systematic Reviews. So go and have a look at that if you're interested to find out more. Next up, then, I'll talk a little bit about the eligibility criteria. This is a new feature to help you with your screening in Covidence, but it's also valuable when creating a data extraction template too. So it's about building in the PCOS structure from the very beginning, taking it perhaps from your protocol if you have one, and then integrating it into Covidence from the very beginning of the workflow. So you can include these PCOS criteria PCOS being population, intervention, comparison, outcomes, and study characteristics, such as study design. You can swap out outcome for exposure if you want to, and you can swap comparison for context. So there's also an option for other, which you can't quite see on this screen, but essentially we've built in some flexibility here. So if your review question doesn't quite adhere to the PCOS structure, you're still able to use this tool and have all of your criteria structured in a clear way that's going to really help with the screening process. If you had set up your inclusion and exclusion criteria prior to the release of this update, then they will just appear in the other box at the bottom of this page, and you can move them into the relevant sections above if you think that's going to be useful for you and your team. Okay, I'm going to talk now a little bit about the track sources with regard to the import of references. So you can now add details on single or multiple sources associated with each reference import. We provide a drop-down list to save setup time, so you can select from one of the pre-programmed databases when you bring those studies in, but you can also create custom sources if there's a database that's not listed there. You can also update the numbers of references associated with a source. Each source is automatically summarized on your Prisma flow diagram, and you can see a little excerpt of that on this screen on the left. We now also save the file name of the import, which means you can keep track of previous imports and use that file name to store some information about where it came from, the date, for example, if you're working on an update. All sorts of things like that. You can use the file name to keep track of that information if you want to. We also know that transparent reporting is really crucial for high quality reviews. Creating a flowchart can be quite time consuming and draw on a lot of resources, perhaps from an information specialist or others. In the past, you might have had to keep certain bits of information in multiple places before bringing them all together to create the flowchart. So now you can download a fully modifiable docx version of your Prisma flowchart from Covidence, and that's going to include all the source information that you've provided, all the numbers, and it aligns with the requirements of Prisma 2020. So this is a pretty useful addition, we think. And because it's modifiable, you can remove the sections that you don't need. You can add additional information if you want to. Maybe there's something that your particular project requires that isn't actually a Prisma requirement, but it needs to be in there for your records. So this is infinitely modifiable, and that's nice and quick and easy to do in this docx format. You've also got a date stamp on this document, so you can use it for your record keeping if you want to. All right, so that was Prisma. I'm going to talk a little bit now about the data extraction in Covidence and how we see that progressing in the future. Data extraction is probably one of the most difficult and time-consuming aspects of any literature review. It's so difficult to get right. Creating, perfecting, and actually using a data extraction template is really, really challenging, and it's almost impossible to get right the first time. So what we're doing at Covidence is we're investing heavily in our data extraction tool at the moment, and we're gradually releasing new features and templates that we hope will make the data extraction process easier, more seamless, maybe even enjoyable in Covidence. So if you're creating a new review in Extraction 1, in our Extraction 1 tool, which is where most of our focus is in terms of development at the moment, then you'll be using our new template, which you can see over here on the right. You can also now merge and unmerge studies in Extraction 1, which you weren't able to do previously. So I'm now going to show you another neat thing that we've introduced recently in the in Extraction, which is an improved PDF experience. Both our extraction tools now have a really great PDF experience in that you can navigate this document much more easily. So when you're in extraction in Covidence and you see your form over on the right hand side and your study on the left, you can now switch to an outline view where you can quite very easily see the page that you need to zero in on to extract the information that you need. You've got a search function which searches just the PDF. and lots of other neat things for sort of panning in, zooming in, zooming out, and reorientating the page if you've got one of those huge tables. So again, we just want to try and make this process as painless as possible by making these little improvements along the way to make your journey a little bit easier. Okay, so I've just run through a few new features there. There's quite a lot to take in. You might need some help. So suggest if you would like to get some more information or explanation around how any of these features work, you can go to our knowledge base at any time. There's a lot of information there, articles to support you through the steps of the review process, frequently asked questions. We've also got some videos that can help you navigate whatever it is that you're trying to do in Covidence. And you can also, on this knowledge base, find out about our upcoming webinars, and you can watch recordings of recent ones that we've done as well. Finally, then you can also click the question mark when you're in the platform at the top right of the screen to find out about the latest changes. They're always recorded there. Anytime we put out even a small new release or update, you will be notified via the what's new section up there. Every page on the platform also has a help button, so if you click on that, you can see a link to the knowledge base, and you can also send, you've also got the option to send an email to us here in the support team. All right. So that was a very quick look at what's coming up in Covidence. Julie, have there been any questions whilst I've been talking, things that we can usefully go through at this point, now that we've got a little bit of time before the end of the session?
Yep, thanks, Laura. We've had a few questions come in. So someone has asked, is it possible to export data extraction in Word format?
No, you can't export a Word document from Covidence. The export options, depending on which data extraction tool you've used, are CSV or Excel, essentially. So the option to export as Word isn't there. However, if you export your data as CSV, you're then going to, you'll be able to copy and paste that over into a Word document as needed.
Great, and we've had another question about how do we know if our subscription has the machine learning feature enabled?
Okay, there's a couple of things that I mentioned with regard to machine learning, but they're both integrated into the platform. So there's no limit on that depending on your subscription. Everybody that uses Covidence has this functionality. So the sort by most recent, as I said, is the default sort now in the platform. So if you're using Covidence, you already have that functionality. And the only limitation around the randomized controlled trial classifier is that will only work for you if you have told us in the settings of your review that you're working on a medical and health sciences review. So if your review isn't in medical and health sciences, then you won't have that functionality, but that's not to do with, that's not dependent on your type of subscription or your plan. That's just because it's limited to studies in that subject area.
Great, thank you very much. We've also had a question come in asking, does Covidence help with data analysis?
Data analysis, so no, not really. The main area of Covidence is the screening and the data extraction. Now, once you've downloaded your CSV from Covidence, that's ready for further analysis as needed. So lots of our customers would then take that information on, and depending on how that data is structured and what type of data it is, they might import it into another program, for example, RevMan or R. They might want to put together meta-analyses or that sort of thing. That's done outside of Covidence. Covidence is for screening and for data extraction.
Perfect. So there aren't any more questions there at the moment. So if anyone does have another question that they'd like to ask about the platform, just had one more come in. Do pop those questions into the questions box. Is there any development or machine learning or robots for doing quality appraisal?
That's a good question. So at the moment, in Covidence, no. But the technology is developing all the time, and we've got a team working specifically on machine learning and how to speed up the work that Covidence does by harnessing some of these tools. So one of the things that we're working on at the moment with regard to AI and machine learning is a tool that will automatically exclude irrelevant references. Now, that's some way from being released, because that needs to be very thoroughly tested internally and then also externally validated before we would put that forward as a new tool on our platform. But it's one area that we're exploring at the moment. The quality assessment part is another area that's certainly ripe for development here, and where I think AI could be of some time save, but for the time being, there isn't any element of that we're working on at the moment.
Thanks, Laura. Does anyone else have any other questions that they'd like to pop into the questions box for us? We've still got a little bit of time. You can answer any questions about the platform.
Yeah, I'll just mention, Julie, in case people are typing, that our monthly Covidence 101 goes through the kind of end-to-end process of using Covidence platform, from importing the references through screening, full text review, data extraction, and export. So if you'd like to take a look at how that's working and have one of our team explain that thoroughly, then the Covidence 101 is a great place to start. And I think the next one of those that we have is coming up towards the end of October, and all the information will be on our knowledge base for anybody who's interested.
So we've had one more question come in about, looks like someone's asking about how do you get to the data extraction form?
Sure. So again, the process after the screening, and once you have a set of studies that you want to include in your review and that you need to take the data from, the process in Covidence is that you set up a form to extract that data, and then Covidence gives you a nice simple view within the platform, where on your screen you'll have the PDF, the paper that you've selected on the left, and then on the right hand side of the screen you'll have the form and the data that you need to take from the papers. You will essentially copy and paste over from the PDF into your form and then save the form. Now, if you are in dual reviewer mode, you'll have two people working on doing that, and then you'll have a stage at the end where you perform consensus, where you look at the reviewer 1 and reviewer 2, what they've each extracted, so you can have a checking stage essentially to make sure that the data that's coming out is correct. But that's essentially how you do it. You look at the papers and you copy and paste what you need from the paper into your form. Hope that answers the question.
Great. We've had one more question come through. When we're using the relevance screening mode, is it possible to stop the screening at some point, or do we need to read through all the references?
Yeah, this is a good question. So the stopping rule is kind of the holy grail, right? There isn't a stopping rule at the moment in Covidence. We don't think that it's a good idea to have one at the moment. We want to make sure that you, the reviewer, look at everything. Now, whether or not in the future there might be, once the research gets to that stage, a recommendation, you've done 70%, or you haven't ticked anything, you haven't included anything for a while, maybe you can leave it there. yeah, maybe down the line, but at the moment, that's not a recommendation that we think is a sensible one, certainly in confidence anyway. So as things stand at the moment, you screen everything, you get right to the bottom of that list, and we don't make a recommendation of when you ought to stop.
Great. I think just as a reminder for people, the previous question about data extraction, we do run step-by-step webinars as well, and those are available for you to sign up to on the upcoming webinars page of the knowledge base. And if you want to watch a recent recording, that's available on the recent webinars page on our knowledge base as well. So those will take you through those particular steps of setting up your review, screening, retrieving full text articles and data extraction, and those go into those kind of steps in a lot more detail for you. So those are all available for you to find on our knowledge base as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Julie. I think that's probably all the questions, so we'll leave it there for today. I'll just wrap up by saying thank you to everybody for your time on the webinar today. It's been great to talk to you all, always interesting to see what comments and questions come up and how we can try and answer those for you during the webinar. So as I've already mentioned, you can find out a lot more information on our knowledge base, or get in touch with us here, Julie, myself, and the rest of the community team. support@confidence.org. Any feedback, any questions, just let us know how you're getting on. We'd really love to hear from you. So thank you very much, Julie, and thank you to you all, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.